But again, it was always little stuff. But it was, I remember one thing that really stuck with me though, when we have some of those tough debriefs, where it's, but like for me specifically, where it's like, why did I do that? Or that mistake that I made, or down to little shit, like I forgot to put new batteries, in my
Yeah.
laser. It's like, but little stuff that could be big stuff.
I
I remember two that stuck with me on that first appointment. One was we got into this cycle, this rhythm, because we were operating so much. We'd get home early in the morning, we'd sleep, till midday. We'd do a debrief. Guys would kind of work out, do their own thing. Then we'd have a brief for the out that night, eat chow, rest, whatever, do some rehearsals. So we would just use, empty buildings in the palace that we were in for CQB, just doing some rehearsals, just getting loose for that night. And we'd been at the range, just sighting in weapons, making sure we're good to go. And there was like one pistol mag that I had that I had not put a few more rounds in. It wasn't empty, but it wasn't completely loaded. And we had just cleared this target. And I remember this distinctly. One of my closest friends, he's like my kid's godfather, a guy named Mark Owen. That's not his real name. Wrote No Easy Day. After
Yep.
our platoon, he went on to Green Team training and all that stuff.
Yep.
It's
Phenomenal
funny
guy.
because as
Just
you're
one of the
saying that,
best
I'm like,
humans.
I'm like everybody in this audience, I think, knows the real name. I don't think.
Okay, Matt. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
Matt looks at
we're
me, and just a phenomenal human. He kind of took me under the wing when I was there as a new guy. Nothing formal, but he's always willing to help the new guys. He's a get there early, stay late, help everybody. The nicest guy in the world. And he looked at me. So the kind of person where I'm going with this is you don't want to disappoint him.
sure.
And it was one of the things like with our parents. I'd rather get screamed at than my dad say I'm disappointed in you. And you're like,
I
no.
know.
And
It makes
so
you feel like that big.
I don't know what it was or what he saw or he noticed something. He's like, are all your mags, are all your mags loaded? Or it was right before we left. And I was like, yeah. And I guess I hesitated. And I don't know what he did. He went right for my pistol mags for some reason. And the one fucking mag he pulls out, of course,
Of
is the one
course.
that's half loaded. I'm just like, oh my God. I was like, oh, yeah. The look, he didn't even say anything. The look on his face was I'm talking about it now, like 20 years later. The look on his face was just soul sucking, heart wrenching, like devastation. At least that was my perspective of it, because
Yeah.
he's a person that I held on a pedestal, and he had really poured a lot of time into me. And just again, something that to the average person listening or watching this might say, well, that's not really a big deal. It is a big deal. It's the littlest things that can
It is.
be the biggest deal. And the military attention to detail is like your number one foundation.
Yeah, it is.
And then just other things like that. But I do remember in some of those tough debriefs, it happened more than once, but specifically one after one of our first, real hot gunfights on a target. And, somebody called me out for, one of my CQB room entry, tactics or maneuvers. And we ripped it apart and we talked about it. It was good learning for everybody. But then he pulled me aside after the debrief and he said, "Hey, Gleeson, come here." He's one of those guys he had been a Marine before. So
Yeah.
this was his first combat deployment in that sense, but he had been a Marine, recon guy, sniper, a little bit older guy, experienced. And he was like, "Hey, man, I just want to make sure there's no love lost between us. The reason I brought that up and the reason I called you out the way I did wasn't just for you. It was for everybody to learn from that, because a lot of guys are doing little things like that." And just that gesture of brotherhood and fraternity and solidarity, just making sure that he's like, look, here's why I did that, but making sure we're good. There's no love loss. It's because I love you that I'm bringing these things up. That kind of thing. Those are the things you miss the most. The brotherhood and that type of support that you have from one another and you can't replicate that anywhere else in the civilian world.
I was just gonna say that's an
Go ahead.
awesome Mark Owen or Air quote Mark Owen story, and I was just wondering, man, like what do you still stay in touch with that guy? Because I just remember.
Oh yeah, talk to Mister.
So I'm curious to this because I just remember when that book came out, which was a huge success, No Easy Day, and then because he didn't go through the review process and all that, the government basically, from what I remember, they took all the money that he made off that book.
Horrible, and that's like just scratching the surface of the nightmare that DOD put on him. I mean, someone who literally gave their entire young adult and adult life to the special operations community. I mean, and a team leader, a dev group. I mean, that's like being a made man in the mafia. You have to be a top performer and pour your soul into it. And
they truly they made an example of him.
Oh yeah. And he had gotten advice. He just didn't get good advice. He literally got advice from a Navy JAG. And so he thought he was getting the appropriate advice on how to get
Yeah.
the book vetted and what the process is to go through, because he just didn't know what he didn't know. A lot of like the rest of us. And so he got the advice he got. He applied the advice, and well, that didn't work out. And so they used him. And let's be honest, it's if it had been someone else or a different book, not a death group guy, probably would have just been flushed under the rug, or you wouldn't have heard about it. But it was the book, the first book about you know that mission.
Yeah. That mission.
So we could peel that onion back for days as
Yeah.
far as the reasoning from the upper echelons of leadership in the military and government as to why they took why he was so instantly persona non grata, and why they just really tried to destroy his life financially,
Wow.
emotionally. They tried to go after any revenue he had gotten from speaking engagements,
No.
everything.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Wow.
So
I
remember
yeah, I
didn't
mean
know
because
that.
I
it's
remember
his story to tell, so I don't want to go too far,
yeah,
but
but I just
let's
remember
just say
working
that
at
yeah, they took everything.
yeah, I remember working at Sirius XM at the time, and we'd have like Fox News on at the office, and I just remember segments or like scrolling in the bottom of the screen that basically the government like seized everything that guy made off of that book, and that was insane to me. It really was, because he didn't go through the review process the way that like it was a completely unfounded, I feel like, punishment for something that could have been handled much better.
And from a bunch of bureaucrats who've never held a rifle downrange. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like it's really disappointing, and it's sad. And Chris, I know you feel the same way when our
Oh
brothers and
yeah.
sisters are treated that way after literally pouring their soul and their life.
Life.
At the cost of marriages and being away from their children,
Yeah.
having to recoup those relationships years later when your kids are in their 20s. I mean, and then to treat someone like that, whoever they are, it doesn't matter. It's just yeah, it's very unfortunate. And they're still, he and Tamara, his wife, are still, they're still dealing with some of those repercussions. They're past it now, but from a financial standpoint, they're still. I mean, I think they have to donate their great grandchildren and their grandchildren to DoD. I mean,
It's,
it's a long
I,
payment plan,
it
I
just
believe.
it makes no sense because there was I read actually I read that book when I was in Benghazi. Actually, I remember reading.
Yeah,
That's when we were passing it around and Oz had it and I read it and I remember I went to Jack. I went to Jack and I said, "What the fuck's the big deal? There's nothing classified in this thing.
yeah,
This is a good book, man. There's absolutely zero OPSEC in here." I said, "Why is this thing?"
I know.
And we just couldn't make any sense of it. And then, of course, a few weeks later, we got attacked, so I didn't think about it anymore. But when I came back, I just want just we went this route here. I don't know if he remembers or not, but Mark, he did speak to me before we did our book, and he directed me. That's when we got our clearance attorney. He said, "You do it this." So he may not remember. It was on the phone. I was about ready to go speak at a tennis event in Cincinnati,
Yeah,
and I said, "Call this guy before you do the whatever and the book." And I called him, and he says, "This is what you need to do." I didn't tell him what he just said, "This is if to protect yourself." So even then, when he was going through it, he was still helping somebody that he didn't even know who the hell he was, and he was helping us do it where
yeah,
we were. So that's awesome to hear that he's always been that kind of guy. Because
always.
Thanks for checking out Battle Line Podcast. This is just a smaller clip from our latest episode, which you can check out in its entirety by clicking here. While you're watching, be sure to hit the subscribe button and thumbs up the video to show your support. Now, if you'd really like to help us out, click the thanks button below to make a donation. It goes directly to us in keeping Battle Line Podcast going for you.